Okay, now we are recording. Please, can you tell me your name and who are you?
Yes, my name is Henry Ni Ajiri Wellington, and officially they add the title Professor to the forename, and then they add FGA. The FGA stands for Fellow of the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. So I am a professor of architecture, and until 7 years ago I was in full-time teaching of architecture, but then I retired, and then I left my former university, which is known as Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, and came down to Accra, and I was invited by the Department of Archaeology of the University of Ghana to come and assist them to develop a postgraduate studies in heritage studies, and because of my connection with architecture, I thought I could come and be involved. Now, before I came, I was involved in their research on the Osu Danish period. Now, I came to this research because in 2002, I was introduced to a book which was written by a Danish man called Torkild Hansen. His book, in fact, was part of what you call a trilogy, 3 books. One is titled The Coast of Slaves, the other is The Coast of the Ship of Slaves, and then Island of Slaves. I read the first one, The Coast of Slaves, and I realized that it was talking about my hometown, Osu, the history, which some I knew, some I didn't. And the book was very fascinating, talking about the period the Danes came to Osu, in the 17th century, when they stayed on till the 19th century, when they left in 1850. All this was a story or history which I knew in part, some I didn't know. So after I finished reading the book, I decided that, wow, I have to research further so that I can also write a book on Osu. So I began the research, which took me to first back to Accra, to Osu, to interview a number of elderly people, to go to the various houses belonging to people of Osu who had Danish ancestry, and then I traveled on to Germany, to follow up on one of the early Danish Osu mulattoes, and eventually through the National Museum of Denmark. I was also in Denmark to know a little bit about some of these Danish Osu mulattoes I've read about in the book of Stones, Coast of Slaves. When I finished my research, it happened that Ghana was celebrating its golden jubilee of independence, the 50th anniversary. So somebody heard about my research and invited me to mount up an exhibition on my research findings. I came across a number of photographs, family histories, some maps, buildings, and so on and so forth. So I mounted an exhibition, and it was very successful. First, it lasted for 3 days, and over 1,000 people visited the exhibition, and everybody commented on very positively that they want to know more about the findings. So I decided that, well, let me put all of this into a book form. As I said, later on I did some other exhibitions. Now it happened that just about 2010, the Ghana Danish Cultural Fund has launched a fund to support people who are involved in various aspects of culture, including literature. So I was encouraged to apply for a grant from this Danish Ghana Fund to publish the book. I got a grant. So from my research findings, I published Stones Tell Stories, at Osu, what is the main title of the book, and the subtitle is Host Community Memories of a Host Community of the Danish Transatlantic Slave Trade. 1,050 copies were printed by the publisher, and within 11 months, all the books got finished. So I realized that, I've touched a subject which is of great interest to many people, scholars, ordinary people, Ghanaians, non-Ghanaians, Danes, and so on and so forth. So since then, I've done the second edition. It's yet to be published. But whilst I'm waiting for the second edition to be published, I'm doing further research to write another book on one of the very interesting personalities I came across when I was doing my research. In fact, I made reference to this person in my first book, but just a short period. For a short, 2 or 3 pages. But because I discovered so much information on this person, I decided that I'm going to use the material I've obtained on him to write a sequel to the book Stones Tell Stories. Now, the person I'm referring to is called Frederick Noy Dewona. Now, this Ghanaian, in the 19th century, early part of the 19th century, when the Danes were contemplating, bringing up their work to an end in the Guinea coast, they began to assist the local community to send people to Denmark, as they have done on 1 or 2 occasions during the early part of the Danish administration. Now, it happened that according to the local stories, the oral tradition, there were 4 young men from the Osu community who were sent to Denmark. One of them is this Noy Dewona. I was told that the 3 other young men who accompanied him to Denmark died on the way. They couldn't survive the long journey. At that time, they had to go to the Caribbean, from the Caribbean before they went northwards to Europe and then finally to Denmark. It was 6 to 8 weeks, and many of them couldn't survive. But Noy Dewona survived, and he had the fortune to be exposed to the Danish culture and the Danish education. In fact, according to the information we had, he was, one moment, can you speak and stop? This lady looks familiar to me.